Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt. It's been a while. We had the Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Many of us had the opportunity to receive an email from Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt where he shares book recommendations and articles and Sfarim. So if you're not on that list, I highly recommend you sign up at eliezerbrodt@gmail.com to get added to that list. I want to thank you personally for providing a lot of interesting reading material. So thank you for that. We are in the middle of a war. Rabbi Brodt is in Ramat Beit Shemesh. He's in his Ma'amar, where he says his shiurim from, and we hope and pray that everything stays calm and things should calm down. And our learning should be a zchus for the soldiers that are fighting, bring back the captives, and all the Jews in Eretz Yisrael should be safe and sound. And we hope and pray that this comes very, very quickly. This year, as we approach the end of Kiddushin, is about a very interesting topic. Friday weddings, something they used to do very much. Rabbi Brodt is going to discuss the historical overview of when they did this, how they did this, and specifically a controversy with the Ramah in Krakow. And we appreciate and thank our donor who has dedicated this year as a schus refuah shalema for Avigdor Binyamin ben Frumit Peril, and the shir and the learning should be a schus for his quick refuah shalema. With that, Rabbi Brodt, how are you today?
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, so take us right in. First of all, tell us, how are you doing in Eretz Yisrael? How are you dealing with what's going on? And then you can begin this year.
Baruch Hashem. So far, so good. Today we did have a siren, so we had to run into the mamad about an hour ago. But Baruch Hashem, everyone's doing okay. The kids don't have, not all the kids have school, so I guess the parents, I don't know, maybe the parents, the kids, whoever, don't have, it's not all the same, but whatever. Okay, I want to discuss about Friday weddings. There's a historical overview about it, and we're going to get to a controversy that took place in Krakow with the Ramah. So now, one of the many halachic questions that come up, the halachic issues, so to speak, that come up with chasanas is when you have the chasana, which day of the month. Some people don't have it at the later part of the month, which is a topic which we will, Mirz Hashem, devote an episode to soon. Sometimes, in Lamashal, during Sfira, during the 3 weeks, people don't get married. Now, what about on Friday? Could one get married if they wanted to? Did Yidden ever get married on Friday? And that's what we're going to discuss today. It's not an attempt, as I always point out, to discuss every aspect with it, but just to discuss some of the more interesting aspects possibly with this discussion, with this topic. Okay. Basically like this. There's a Mishnah in the beginning of Ksuvis, which talks about the preferred day to get married. It talks about it being on Wednesday. It's an early takon of Chazal, as Rashi says. And in the first few blot in Ksuvis, it deals with it on and off, and as it goes into other topics. And we find, Lamashal, in the early Gaonic work, Sefer Chilukim Bein Anshe Mizrachu B'nei Eretz Yisrael, which we discussed exactly a year ago in an episode, what this origins of this work is. But basically, in Bavel, it seems the minhag was they got married on Thursday, Yom Chamishi, while in Eretz Yisrael, they got married on Yom Revi. Now, I'm not going into all the aspects of the times of the Mishnah, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Tosefta, all this. One could see Lamashal, Shol Lieberman in his parish on Tosefta Kapshuta, Yitzhak Shilat in his book, Prakim Mishtal Shel Halacha. They deal with it, and all the different girsais and just what the Gemara says, what the summing up from the Gemara. I'm jumping right past that, starting with the Rambam. The Rambam writes, it's usher to get married on Friday. Ein noisim nashim loy mer Shabbos loy be'echa b'Shabbos. Why? Gzeira shama yavel lidei chilul Shabbos b'tikkan Suda, preparing the Suda that the chassan is going to be is tarred in the Suda, and then the Rambam says another sentence. Ve'ein tzarich loymish aser lisa b'Shabbos. Certainly on Shabbos it's aser. Okay, Magen Mishnah over there brings down. He says, "Achshavim kaimeseinu nagu lisa isha b'shishi v'lo yadati amas samchu v'zeh." Where in the world are they getting this from? That they are getting married on Friday. Then he says, then he brings down the Ramban also is ma'irich about this, and the Ramban also says not to get married on Friday. And he says, and the Magen Mishnah refers to that. It seems that the Rimagash, the father, the Rebbe of the Rambam, again not directly but through his father, also says the same type of thing. So here we're seeing strongly the Rambam Maggid Mishnah, Ramban, Rimagash, not to get married on Friday. Now, looking in the Kaira Geniza, Shlomo Dov Goten, and later on Mordechai Akiva Friedman, where he worked on documenting all different aspects from Ksuvas that were found in the Kaira Geniza, it seems that Friday was definitely not a popular day to get married. Okay, so, and this makes sense based on what we're saying. Okay, now comes along Taisus and Ksuvas, and Taisus and Ksuvas says, nearly the Mekom Makam Ein, you could get married va'ato noigin lisa af b'shishi, even on Friday. Mishum dein bezdin kavuin. There's no bezdin kavuin, which relates to what the Mishnah talks about in Ksuvas. Now, l'maisa, it's not only Taisus, numerous Makairis in Ashkenaz can be found. You can find that support this. I'm not going to give a long list, just a brief list. Keach, Marami Rutenberg, the Rush, later on the Maril, Maramintz, and many more. Okay. So it seems here we're seeing that something happened. It seems l'chayra that the Chachmei Ashkenaz are more makel, and they say even on Friday one could get married. What's more interesting is if you open up the Beis Yosef, after bringing down the Rambam and the Maggid Mishnah and the Ramban that we quoted, he says Achshav minig pashat l'chmeis b'shishi, that they get married on Friday. And Beis Yosef, we know, in general goes with the Rambam, Sfardi, and etc. And this is how he paskins in Shulchan Aruch, not only in Beis Yosef. Okay, so it's interesting what happened over here. That's part of the question. Now, just as a side point, is interesting comment bichlal, is that Taisus in Ksuvas, also on Taisus in Gimel Amud Aleph, talks about which days to get married. Besides for what we said in one Taisus where he says specifically that the minig was in his day that they even got married on Friday, he talks about which days based on the sugyas in the beginning of Suvis, and we know that the Gemara talks about specific days being a specific bracha. The Gemaras talk about based on the days of creation, which day it's better to get married. That there's a day of a special bracha, and so, says Taisus, but that's not enough to be kaveya that day is the day that one should get married. So now says the Pnei Yeshua, while handling the sugya, he says very interesting. Everyone's, which we're going to discuss more in a different episode, but everyone is famous. The Ramah already brings down that they don't get married at the end of the month. Why not? Because it has to be with the moon and brachas and simanim. But when the Gemara gives a mayrdika bracha which days to get married, that people are dismissing. Even Taisus is dismissing. He doesn't understand what's going on. So Mir Hashem, that we'll get to in the next episode or one of the next episodes. Anyway, but the point is that we have Ashkenaz versus Svard, and then already we see the Beis Yosef is already going that they, in his time, it sounds like they were getting married when on Friday. Now, as an interesting Stam Yediyah, one of these types of Yediyahs, the Yalka Ruveni brings down from the Arizal that Yaakov and Leah, when were they married? On Erev Shabbos. And we know Avos Kimu Kol HaTorah Kula, which is the famous Nakuda that many people like to talk about throughout Chumash Bereshis. And the Chuvas Afrikasta Da'anya has a whole arichos about this. Okay, fine. So now the Shaila is, obviously, what happened? What changed from the time of Chazal, which sounds like it was Dafka Wednesday, and the Rambam and all these Rishonim, what happened that the Ashkenaz started to change, that they allowed that one could get married even on Friday. So Lamashal Dar Chashulchan, when he talks about this in Even Ezer, so he says that if you look in the Rambam, the Rambam is referring to is because the Chassan is tarred in the Suda. Something switched. Who's Isaac in the Suda? At least Ar Chashulchan referring to in his time, it was more the Kala side. So once that happened, so it's not such a akpada. The akpada of not getting married on Friday was linked to the Chassans being tarred for some reason. And therefore, when that changed, so already it could change. But the question is when that changed. It's not clear. Is there an exact time to pinpoint when it switched that the Kala side is more Isaac in the Suda as opposed to the Chassan side? Anyway, at the end, Ar Chashulchan says, and this we're going to get back to soon, that in the winter you should be very careful not to do a chuppah on Erev Shabbos because the days are short. But Lamaisa, people don't listen, and we'll talk more about that soon. Now, another aspect in all this is with a very short introduction, which we've mentioned in the past. In the times of Chazal, the marriage process consisted of many steps, which took place over a long period of time. This you see throughout the Gemaras and Ksuvas and Kedushin. There was Erisin, and there was Nesuin, and there could be a long gap between. The Gemara deals with all kinds of issues related to this. Over time, different minhagim developed for different reasons. For example, at one point in the times of the Ga'inim, the Erisin involved reciting a bracha in front of 10 people and a ksuva, after which Nesuin took place much later. Eventually, this was done at the same time and the same day. Now, a valuable collection of primary sources from Ga'inim and the Rishonim that one could see all this literally organized through regions, through Rishonim, through the centuries, is a work from Rabbi Avram Freiman, Seder Kedusha V'Nesuin. Fascinating work. He brings down literally all the Rishonim, and you see where each person was when it happens, and you could probably figure out a lot of different inyanim with what happened with the chasana. Now, with that introduction, we go to a work published for the first time from manuscript in 1910 called Maisa Goinim. It's an important early Ashkenazi work, which is compiled at the end of the 11th century, containing numerous tshuvas from early Chachamim of Ashkenaz. One of them was a Rav Nassan, who was a contemporary of Rashi, who lived in Mainz. He lived most of his life, and this sefer deals with all types of inyanim, halachas, and minhagim. And there's a lot to discuss about this sefer. Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik talks a lot about it in his work called in Volume 2 of his collected essays. And there's a lot to talk about, but not for now. But the point that relates to us is as follows. There's a discussion over there. It seems they started making that the first part of the chasana, so to speak, was on Friday, and then the ksuva was written, and then the wedding meal took place when? On Friday night. And then when did the ksuva take place? Right after Shabbos. So the ksuva was written on Friday. Then there was this what will be called the chasana suda, and then the signing of the suda took place. The signing of the suda took place after Shabbos. What's going on? Why did this happen? And why was it going on place on Friday? So this with Nas and Tainas, that's because of the poverty. They wanted to have more people to be able to attend the chasana. And okay, now. Similar, the Ravan in the beginning of Ksuva says a similar type of thing, that they did it on Friday because it was very expensive for chasanas to make the expenses go down, so to speak. So this Avram Freiman, who we just quoted earlier, suggests that this poverty was probably related to the Crusades, which wiped out many German Jews and their communities. So Dafka in these communities, they switched the minig of what the day was when to get married, to have it on Shabbos, and then you could accomplish, I guess, save on Shabbos Sheva Brachas. Again, in modern day times, people always complain about the costs of Shabbos Sheva Brachas. So here you have a way out. Okay, fine. Now, also, we could see that the minig seemed to have at some point in time in early Ashkenaz also really take place on Fridays, is that there's a different, there's a minig known, there's chuppahs main, it's called, which also we're going to discuss a little bit more in an upcoming episode, but basically is that there's a minig that on the day of the chasana there were two chuppahs, not one. One took place early in the morning and one took place later on in the day. Eventually, an elaborate ceremony developed for all these different chuppahs, and Yekesh Yidden do it. Some even do it till today. And Rabbi Yamin Hamburger, a famous of Mechol Mareshes Ashkenaz and Bnei Brak, I believe he did it for some of his kids, and he has a Richos Nifla in his famous work Sharshe Minig Ashkenaz, all about every single aspect of the development of this Minig Chuppahs Mein. What's significant is that Lamashal, one of the earliest sources that we have for this in a Sefer Gematrius Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, which was recently published in manuscript, but we have it in other sources that were not just printed in manuscript, that it began early Friday mornings. Now, at a certain point, they stopped making weddings on Friday, so they still had the chuppahs main, but the earliest sources of chuppahs main used to take place, this whole elaborate simcha, which if you look even a few hundred years later, in the 1600s, in Vermais, Lamashal, all unbelievable amount of different minhagim and different things that they did for the Simchas Chasam V'Katla, all around this chuppah and before and afterwards. It's Lamashal detailed in the famous work recently published, Rabbi Yispa Shamish of Worms, who deals with it. But he says that when did they do this chuppahs main, this Yakiyid, it switched back to Wednesday, which was the Iker Takana. Now, so what I'm trying to show is that at some point in Ashkenaz, it's clear it was even from this chuppahs main, it was on Friday. It's Friday mornings already when the whole process started, but eventually it goes back. Now, What happens that it goes back and forth? We're not sure. But Lamashal, the Talmud of the Taz, the Nachal Shiva, writes about Germany, where they used to make the Suda in the middle of the week so that more guests would be able to come. Where in Poland, where everyone was conscious, where everyone lived together, much more close together, and it wasn't so much that you had to invite people from other cities. So then the weddings took place on Friday. So okay, so what's interesting is he's giving Edus, this Nachal Shiva, we actually spoke about him in one of the episodes on Gittin. He's the classic work for all aspects of Hilchos Shtaris, how to write a Shtar Ksuva and everything. So right over there, he talks about in the beginning of the Sefer Nachal Shiva. So here we see what the specific minig for Germany was in his time, that the takas went back to the original takana, Wednesday, whereas in Poland, they did it on Friday. And when is this work published? In 1667. Okay, now, interestingly enough, just now to mention an interesting nakuda over here is like this. An important chasana took place in 1701, and this was of the daughter of Rabbi David Oppenheim, who was the tremendous Rav, famous person at the time. We've actually spoken about him various times in episodes because he's famous for having one of the most incredible all-time Sfarim collections, which still exist out of Yom. So now, in honor of the wedding that took place between his daughter and he was a wealthy person besides for being a chashuv rav, with another very chashuv wealthy family, they wanted to there was an old custom called the Breiflet minig, and they wanted to redo this minig, this old Ashkenazi minig. They wanted to it wasn't done in their times, so they wanted to revive it. So what they did was they published a 5-page booklet with all the hanhagas of this minig, with its 13 sections of the halach, so to speak, the halachas in depth again of all the aspects of the simcha that took place. Unbelievable simcha that they did, all elaborate affair with the chasana, the chuppah, and everything. Now, when does this chasana take place? And this is it seems the original minig also was, again, on Friday. So this is an old Yekisha minig, similar to what we mentioned, the chuppah's mine. So this called the Breiflet minig. And so now, so they published everything by Reb David Oppenheim revolved around Sfarim. He published a 5-page booklet, which only one copy survived. And from there, a bunch of years ago, someone published it. And in 2001, Yitzchak Zimmer Professor Yitzchak Zimmer, also a very big expert of Yekisha Minhagim. So he published for a chasana a tfus tzilum of this 5-page booklet, but then he added on like 60, 70 notes discussing all the different things that's in these minhagim. One or two of them I'm going to mention soon. But the point is, again, here we see a chasana taking place when Erev Shabbos. Now, what it says is like this. It says that for 40 years, it says in the introduction, it seems it stopped, that the chasana wasn't done Erev Shabbos. Mean to say, if you go back a few minutes ago, I said the Rav Yusfa Shemesh of Worms, he says what happened. The minig went back to Wednesday, and so too from as far as 1667. The Nachal Shiva also tells us that the Yeki Yidden did it on Wednesday. But the minig of Breiflet, done according to the real way it's supposed to be done, is Erev Shabbos. And that's what was done in this chasana that took place in 1701. So basically is from 1667 until 1701, it didn't. And they wanted Kilu to bring it back to the what they call the original Yeki minig of having the chasana being done on Erev Shabbos. Anyway, okay. Now this booklet, besides for Zimmer's comments, there's a lady, Dvorah Kaplan, who also devoted a whole barichus based on all different minhagim that you could go down in many rabbit holes in the different minhagim of chassan that come out from this thing. But we'll discuss about one or two of them soon. Now, look, what happened on Erev Shabbos? Did Yidden get married Erev Shabbos? So Lamashal, just to list very, very fast, the Chuvas Masas Binyamin, Talmud of the Ramah, dies in 1619. He talks about it. It sounds like they definitely made chasanas when on Erev Shabbos. The Knesset Gdoila, who's in Izmir, he also talks about it, and his work, he dies in 1673. He refers that the custom in his time was definitely getting married Erev Shabbos. He's more Sfardi, which we already said is not so problematic, because the Beis Yosef also brings down that the minig in his time was already switching to Friday. The Magen Avram says the same thing about Poland, and we'll get back to that shortly. In Italy, a little earlier, let's say 1616, we have from a minhag book written by Yehuda Medina that he wrote in English actually, and he also in Italian for the Goyim. It talks about the chasana. It sounds like it was either Wednesday or Friday, but he himself, from his autobiography, we see he got married on Friday. The Chida, talking in his travels, is going a little later. In the Chida, which we spoke a bunch of times about his travels, he talks about it and says, he talks about a chasana about Italy. There was a whole tragedy over there, and was referring to two weddings that took place when, on Erev Shabbos, a building collapsed and many people died. Okay, fine. So, in the same time as the Chida is the Markeves HaMishnah, and the Markeves HaMishnah also writes in his work, Shulchan Atzei Shittim, that the minhag in his city, this is, I guess you could call it Galicia, was also to get married Erev Shabbos. Fast forward, one other Maramakim about this, and we'll go further, is the Litvish Gaon, the Deres, in his autobiography, when he talks about the wedding of his son-in-law and daughter, Rev Cook. It took place when? On Friday in El 1884. Then he talks about another chasana that also took place Erev Shabbos. So we see in the Litvisher world, if we're getting much later to the 1880s, it was done. And then the Munkatcher, we also have to bring Hasidim. He writes that various Talmidim in the Baal Shem Tov married off their children specifically on Erev Shabbos. So what we're seeing is it's a minhag getting married Erev Shabbos. Okay, fine. Now, again, we could list on endless amount of Makairis, but also we find this in literature of memoirs of different people from 1865 and others. We're not going to go through all of them, but the point is, you could definitely find sources about it. So now the shaila is, what's the possible reason why one should not get married on Friday? So now, if one looks, we have takanas of all. We discussed this in the past a little bit. The Vad Harabanim of Lita, Lamashal, in 1761 said, "B'shum panav v'ayfen, no one should get married on Friday." Why not? What could be the possible reason? So now we open up our Shulchan Aruch Chaim, Shin Lametes Sif Daled, and it talks about getting married on Shabbos. Then it says over there, the Ramah says, what about getting married on Shabbos? On Shabbos, there's not Erev Shabbos. The Ramah says, Yesh matir lekadosh heichad ein lo ishu banim, based on Rabbeinu Tam. The efshadu adin hachnisa lechupa shari, va'af agad lo kaimel anhachi. But he says like this: if someone was never married before, one could get married even on Shabbos. Why? Because there's gadol kavod abrius. Now, what's going on? Why does the Ramah say this? What's going on? So the Ramah, all of a sudden, you read another two lines, you'll see the Ramah adds in a few pieces of information. He says, what happens like this? They started to make the chasana Erev Shabbos. And then there was a fight. Money. Chasana is atali in money. And basically, the two sides didn't see eye to eye. So it happens sometimes. This is a Rishas Chak situation, and he throws in Galil Kavod Abrius. Says the Ramah, be careful not to get yourself into such a situation, but if you do, you could get married even on Shabbos. I mean to say, be'etzem the halacha is based on the sugyas and beya that you should not get married on Shabbos. It's aser for various reasons. But the point is, Ramah says he goes so far that even on Shabbos one could get married. Now, it's something strange. You look at this Ramah. What's going on? Why does Ramah? First of all, in general, people claim that this is like a Ramah talking a lot, so to speak. You don't really find the Ramah talking so much. Maybe there's something going on over here that it's alluding to something that happened. So if you look, there's a work that not so many people are aware of even exists, but there's, besides the Magen Avram, besides writing the actual Magen Avram, he has something called the Gilyonis of the Magen Avram, which is on the side of the Shulchan Aruch, and in many Shulchan Aruchs they don't even have it anymore, but in Mechon Yerushalayim they do. He had Mar Mekaymis. So over here he writes, Ayin Chuvas Ramah Simin Kuf Chaf Hey. Okay, what happens? If you look in there, you'll see a fascinating story, and this sheds light on this whole Ramah. Basically, what happened is like this. Everyone thinks that if the let's say Gadol A lived today, and he would be around, and he would give his psakim, everyone would go according to him, and they wouldn't have any problems. And the answer is no. There was always machlokes in Klal Yisrael, and even when the Ramah, the great Ramah, who all of halacha is based on him for the past few hundred years, there were problems in his big city in Krakow. What happened was, there was a Maisa, and he writes this Barichos. Basically, he was in Masada Kedushin. It was Friday night. and it was a whole story with she was a Yisaima, and there was a whole fight with the Nadunya, with the dowry and everything, and basically the chassan was about to stop the chasana and not get married to her and never get married to her, and it was getting dark and dark and dark. And Lamaisa, somehow they arranged and it got everything was shalom but it was already Shabbos. So the Ramah felt like this. She's a Yisaima, Meirdika Busha. The probability of this happening Matzah Shabbos Sunday, getting them together again, is going to be zero. He has to let this person get married. Now, the Ramah went ahead and he was Masada Kedushin, and he let the person get married. It's given like Yehudim Haisayir, it's the tumbling in Krakow. It seems this psak was attacked. The Ramah writes, you could see even from the tshuva, again, depending on how dramatic the speaker who's saying over this tshuva can make it more dramatic. I'm not a dramatic person, so I'm not going to make it as dramatic. But if you look at the tshuva's Ramah, you'll see there's something going on over here. A Talmud of his was an eyewitness account of it. We have Maram Tikton, he talks about it, he was there. And the point is that there was a fight because of money in this in Krakow, and the Ramah paskin that you could get married on Shabbos. But the point was, when was it supposed to happen? Erev Shabbos. Now, the Ramah, interestingly enough, says in the middle of this tshuva that it was a keseder. The chasanas happened all the time on Krakow, and it was Erev Shabbos. But something happened. I guess maybe some rabble-rouser decided to go after the Ramah for this. And the point was, the Ramah had to write a massive tshuva to explain, to defend himself. What was this psak based on? A lot of times when you learn Ramah, you don't know where he's coming from. Here, we have a few-page tshuva, fascinating tshuva where the Ramah goes through the sugyas, 7 different reasons behind this psak, and you could see how the Ramah learns, how he worked through a sugya, all different things. It's a fascinating tshuva. The Marshal Ted Fram in his book, Ideals Face Reality, Jewish Law and Life in Poland, 1550 to 1655. He has pages on this Ramah, but there's tons to speak about in the Ramah and Bechlal, the Ramah's method even from this tshuva. Al Kopanim. The point is, he says it was very common that 5 or 6 chuppahs in Krakow used to take place on Fridays. So the kids are okay, and no one complained, and it went even to Shabbos. Okay, Adkan with the Ramah. We'll get back to Ramah in a minute. Now, the Marshal in Italy in 1668, there's a manuscript. This guy Weinstein puts a book about all the minhagim of Italy, chasanas, and we see the same type of thing. A fight broke out. It was Erev Shabbos. It was Erev Shabbos chasana. Fight about the money. Blah blah blah. And the end, they get married, but they get married very close to Shabbos. Okay, so you see, it was common. Now that could be. This could be the reason why people were opposed to getting married for Friday weddings. Okay. Lamaisa, we see much later on, this Techemed writes that he had to make a takana against Friday weddings because it caused Chilul Shabbos. We find Rabbanim making this takana in the Chuvas Marchei Leiv in 1930. There were Rabbanim made such a takana. Okay, now, interestingly enough, there's a famous historian / Rav who we spoke about. One of the first episodes I ever said over here for all Daf was Rav Dembitzer, his name was, author of the Klilis Yaifi. So he was a dayan, and he's also a historian, an expert of Krakow. He writes that after a certain incident, a takana was passed against performing weddings on Fridays. That's what he says. Now, he had manuscripts of Pinkasim, of Krakow, and this type of stuff, which we don't have today. So it's possible it was there. L'maisa, the Aruch HaShulchan does not say where he got it from, but he says, he brings down this Ramah, he brings down the Ramah and the Chuvas, and then he says that a takana was made not to get in Krakow. Shaloi lasa shum chuppah be'erev Shabbos. He says the Aruch HaShulchan v'tikon yafahu the kamakal kulam yesh alidei zeh obam lechil Shabbos with Rabbi Meir Chayrif, which I said he already says in Even Ezer. Sheyam k'tzarim v'chol makom efshel hanikein tzchar meruba min hashamayim v'akabanim gam k'shi efshel hanikein achiv akol yirei lehim there's lahagdim achuppah kol ma she'efshel. Okay. Lamaisa, the Mishnah Berurah also says you should try to avoid getting a chuppah erev Shabbos. Also fine. Interestingly, in the Shulchan Eliezer, he also brings down the Klilis Yefim Mefurish, that there was a takana in Krakow not to do it because look what happened in times of Ramah. Now, interestingly enough, the Marshal, there's a tzava of Pinchas Michal, also a yid we spoke about in the Shir Masechtas Nazir. In his tzava, he goes out of his way to say, be careful not to make chasanas erev Shabbos, especially in the short Shabbosim. We find in a book from Professor Finkelstein, Jewish Self-Government in the Middle Ages. He also publishes a manuscript in Corfu. They also made such takanas, and this, it seems, is because Chilul Shabbos. As it gets closer to Shabbos, it's dangerous for Chilul Shabbos. Now, interestingly enough, there's a Bach in Chuvas, where he talks about Barichos, and he goes like this Ramah. And it seems the Chuva, it's clear, it seems that it was when he was a Rav in Krakow, and he's passing like the Ramah. So what is Demitzer is talking about, that the Takana was made because of this Ramah story? If we have that the Bach was much later than is a nice amount of years past the Ramah, and he seems to be going with the Psak of the Ramah in Krakow. Okay. Lamaisa, interestingly enough, the Buchacher Rav writes that something once happened to him, a similar type of thing, on Friday, and the wedding got delayed, and he relied on this Chuvas Ramah, and he performed the wedding. The Munkacher was very upset at the printers who published the Buchacher Sfarim, who published this Psak of the Buchacher. He held you should not publish it for the Hamoinam. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, when you go through all the different Takana books, which I'm not going to list all of them out here, but basically it seems there were chasanas even on Shabbos, okay, and all different places and all different years, in Lita, Galicia, and France, but we're not going to list them all out. It's a little too boring. Okay, now, but interestingly enough, just a few last points to this topic, like this. The Tur in Shin Lamed Ches writes that it's mutter to have a guy play klishir with the chuppas, by the chuppah, and this is a chuppah taking place Erev Shabbos, and it's not a problem of Amir La'akim, because Amir La'akim Makam Mitzvah, the Ein Simchas Chasam V'Kala B'Loi Klishir. This is what the Tur brings down from Rishonim in Siman Shin Lamed Ches. Now, so it's fascinating. But what happens is like this: the Ramah paskins like this, as does the Marshal, as does many other paiskim. So what you see over here is that there was a minute, and this, it seems clear. It's documented. I think Yitzchak Rifkin documents this a little bit in an article Klizmarim, that basically Yidden had goyim at the chasana used to take place when Erev Shabbos, and they had live music being played by goyim. This is fascinating because this is something which sounds like very not. This sounds like something you would not think would happen today. I mean, say if someone said such a psak, you would say it's scandalous, but this is a minig that seems, as I said, the Ramah, the Marshal, the Magen Avram, I believe, goes with this also. And the point is that there was such a psak. Now, going back to the kuntris I said from Reb David Oppenheim, not only did they play music Erev Shabbos with the chassan, they even did it. I said there's this 5-page booklet enumerates all different aspects of simcha that they did for this chasana. So one of the things was they had a band of goyim even during the day on his way to shul. So you see mamish this tour going this tour out of sight. Not the tour brings it down from Rishonim is only talking about by the chuppah, which you could say is taking place Erev Shabbos. So maybe it's not clear if it's on Shabbos. But from David Oppenheim, it's clear when it took place even on Shabbos. Now, just to extend this and drop further, recently a book came out, Travels of the Yid Avram Levi, which he wrote it in Yiddish. His travels took place between 1790 1723. Anyway, in the travels, he's talking about Prague, the city of Prague, and Kabbalah Shabbos. He says, well, you know what they did with Kabbalah Shabbos? They played with live instruments. That's an incredible thing. And we know that later on, years later, in the controversy with the reform, this became a very hot topic. If it's mutter to play with organs and this type of stuff, with goyim, etc., we're not going to get into it. But the point was that we see from this tour that it was an accepted minig that the chuppah took place when Erev Shabbos, and now he's adding even another thing that were able to use a guy to play musical instruments at this chasana. Okay. Now, just to conclude with last 3 ideas is as follows. Number 1, it seems at one point in time a minig came that there's a minig brought down. Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that he says the akala should not light candles after her chuppah with a bracha only on Erev Shabbos. So the question is, what's going on over here? Only Erev Shabbos. Why would there be a tzad to light candles after the chuppah during the week, if the chasna is during the week. Okay. Anyway, turns out Rav Shlomo Kluger says it seems that a minig came, Amaratzistic, a minig evolved at a certain point in time, that women taka would light candles even during the week after the chuppah. Okay. Anyway, so Professor Sperber, in his famous work Minhagi Yisrael, suggests that maybe what happens is like this. Once this is a minig that got misplaced, so to speak. Once the minig became an Ashkenaz, that chasanas took place when Erev Shabbos, so when the first time is the lady lights is on Erev Shabbos, so then that's what the halacha is referring to. But then it went back. As we showed over here, especially at some point the minig went back to Wednesday. Certain places it wasn't clear. So the Amaratzis is sometimes a minig evolves from not knowing where it came from. They were doing what was supposed to be done on a regular Friday, so they thought to do it even on a Wednesday. That was the mistake that ended up creeping into minhagim of certain people, which Rosh Hashanah, as I said, comes out against. And the last two Yudiyas is like this. The whole time I'm mentioning, is there any other sources about weddings on Friday? So Lamashal, as I've claimed in the past, that sometimes one buys a book. I have this Kabbalah from different people. I heard this Lamashal from Professor Shnei Zalman Lyman. One of the reasons why you buy books is something you have to be able to show it to people when you have a shiur. So recently came out a book, 2 fat volumes, and it's called The Art of the Ketubah, Marriage Contracts from the Library of JTS, Shalom Saber. So these 2 massive volumes with picture illustrated ksuvas, and there's all different things one can learn from it. But Nagea, our discussion, 2 massive volumes, expensive, so that's why I have to make sure to have at least one use from it publicly, and that is a lot of times the Italian ksuvas we see they're dated when Erev Shabbos. So we see, like I already brought earlier, that there were chasanas on Erev Shabbos that took place even on Erev Shabbos. Many times, especially in Italy, we have the dating took place on Erev Shabbos, okay? And then that's one Yediyah to end with. And then I said, it seems it's interesting. What's one of the claims, what's the reason why this minig switches from originally to be on Wednesday, and then it jumps to Erev Shabbos, and part of the reason suggested has to do with poor people and everything. So it's interesting. I wasn't even really aware of this, but it seems it's Ada Yoim. It's a Hasidic minig, which is they make before a chasana, they make a special suda for the aniyim. So I was asked to look into this a few years ago, and I looked into it, and I see Taka, there's a lot of interesting sources in memoir literature that before a chasna, they would make a whole fancy suda, dafka for the aniyim. I mean, say at the chasna itself, they didn't necessarily invite the aniyim, but beforehand, in these little shtetlach, they would make a whole thing for aniyim. Interesting, just one interesting maramakam about this, and we'll come to almost the conclusion, is like this. The reason obviously is because tzedakah by b'shas chasana is an important thing. We know this already from Gemara and Shabbos, the famous story where Rabbi Kiva's daughter was saved. She was on the day of her wedding. She was going to die with a snake bite, and then she was still alive. And what happened was, it turns out she gave tzedakah before. So we see tzedakah linking to the chasana. There's already early makairos. And as I said, I was able to locate other makairos that they made these sudas. They were makbel and giving tzedakah. Okay, but this interesting idea is like this. In the early 1900s, an author who went by the pen name of Sholansky, he started collecting and cataloging hundreds of details about every aspect of Jewish life in Europe. He was planning on putting out a survey and then publishing it. And he had this survey in Yiddish, which consisted of 200 pages of questions that had in it 2,087 questions, all about the Jewish life cycle. He never got to finish the project, but the questions survived. And this was what he began this, and was going to show us a window of life before World War I. And Bekitzer, if you go through all these things, you could see all different minhagim throughout the Jewish life cycle. So he talks about over here. In the wedding section of the survey, we find that his questions were as follows. Is the custom still widespread to serve a meal for the poor? How are the poor invited? Is the custom for the bride herself to serve the food at the table? What kind of food and drink are served? Do musicians play? Is it customary for the in-laws to dance with the poor people? Do people give gifts to the poor after the meal? Do people give them donations? Is there a difference between men, women, and children? Etc., etc. The point is that this was a minig, so even if why I'm throwing this in is because on one hand, the reason why it was shifted was for the poverty. But at some points in time, when they were well off, there was a special suda dafka for the haniyim. And then to conclude with this is we know that a lot of times throughout the generations, the chasnas got out of control with the fancy, not only today with the whatever takanas of weddings and stuff. This was a problem throughout the ages. This has been collected by Nachum Rakaver in 2 massive volumes, a lot of the materials about it, the takanas that were made for all these types of things throughout the ages. But okay, that's what we'll conclude with about this topic of weddings on Fridays and the chula.
Thank you. Amazing. I was thinking as you were speaking, perhaps people who are looking to make takanas for weddings would find it beneficial to start scheduling weddings on Fridays, right? Mm-hmm. This way you have the Sudas Chasana, you have the Shabbos Sheva Brachas. It's all one.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have it now, but someone did send me a few years ago. There was such a attempt of a movement in Eretz Yisrael to do such a thing. He sent me from the press about it, and it seems that Hasidim, certain Hasidices, they also do have such a thing. They did attempt to have such a thing.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. Would you like to share with us a book recommendation from your Ma'amad?
Okay, so I'll do a very, very brief sefer. I think I didn't do it yet. Okay, it's called Divrei Chachamim. Looks like this. And it's from the Chai Adam. What does this mean? What's going on here? So sometimes you find out about a manuscript, and then it could take years until the manuscript is actually published. So recently I'm reading the Ma'ariya from Mechon Yerushalayim, and they say they made a discovery of a new manuscript that was written by the Chai Adam in his own handwriting. And they even bring a few pages from it. Okay, so I assume, just like if you're familiar enough with Ma'ariya, there's many projects that 30 years ago they mentioned it's going to come out, and sadly has still not come out. So I thought, okay, there's going to be one of those things. It's going to take 30 years. Literally, within a few months, the whole work comes out. And what is this work? Basically, they found a notebook of the Chai Adam, way before he gets to Vilna as a young man in his 20s, where he wrote Torah that he collected from all the different Gedolim. Some it seems he heard from, and he has them al pi Masechtas, al pi Parshios. So you have a notebook of Torah that he collected on all different things, on all different Masechtas. He even has an index al pi the Parshios of material, and it's written in the handwriting of the Chai Adam, so we can know that it's authentic. So it's an early window into the famous Chai Adam, who is more famous for his Tkufa in Vilna, where he's a Dayan in Vilna, and eventually writes the famous Chai Adam, Chachmas Adam, and other Svarim. So here, an unknown work, no one knew about this work, was recently discovered and recently published. So for me, it was fascinating.
Okay, thank you. And we've mentioned this. We'll just remind everybody that one of Rabbi Brodt's 5, I don't have a better word, heroes, but people that he researches and has a tremendous chashivus for is the Chai Adam. So this must be very special for him. Thank you very much, Rabbi Brodt, for delivering this presentation. Even though you are in Eretz Yisrael, times are uncertain, but this is what we do. This is what Bnei Yisrael does, Klal Yisrael does. We continue doing what's important. We continue with keeping in mind everything that's going on, davening and learning. We continue doing our Avodas Hashem, and that should be a schus for everyone as we began. Thank you.